Let's have a brief prayer to get started. Dear Lord, our light and our rock, be with us here today during our conversation. Help us to listen, learn, and consider the truth in your word. Give us grace to pause and listen so that we may understand what truly matters in our lives and in your world. Amen. So this is the last session on Revelation. What have you learned? What's the one thing so far sticking with you? Is it that there is no S on the end? Revelation is the name of the book. It's not a plural. So, oops. Can Anne, Carolyn, and Paul hear me?
They're all muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super duper. Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. So today we're talking about the letter to, I'm not sure how to say it, Laodicea. Does that sound about right to those of you who might have heard Eric say it last week? Laodicea. Laodicea is the seventh in the letters that we're studying this summer. So we've gone around the area, I think it's 50 square miles with these 7 towns. And this was the seventh. Laodicea was known for its Roman aqueducts, but by the time water got there, it had been traveling a while. So what was going on with the water?
Pollution.
It was lukewarm. Sort of unpleasant. You know, the last thing you'd really want to drink is probably lukewarm water that you know has been in. And they weren't open pipes, right? Sort of more like scoop things. And that's why Jesus said, be hot or cold. Hot water, like in the town of Philadelphia, not this one, is soothing, relaxing, medicinally restorative. Cold water is refreshing and invigorating. Lukewarm is useless, hence the phrase that was in the reading, I will vomit you from my mouth. I got some really good phrases here today. In Revelation 3, which is where this letter is found. It was also a wealthy area known for its medicinal salve used to help people's eyes. So somebody must have figured out something. Thank you. Do you want to I'll have people raise their hands. Do you mind passing them out? Because then they can be passed in before. Gretchen went and made copies of the review forms for those of you who didn't receive them by email. Can you raise your hand if you need a printed copy of the little review? Thank you. Thanks, Gretchen, for doing that. So, of course, Eric was kind enough to give me a really challenging challenge statement for us to talk about to begin. And here it is. Do you agree or disagree the church is one generation away from disappearing? That's quite a jump from just talking about the city of Laodicea. Do you agree or disagree? And one of the things he also says is, that's on the next slide, so I'll just get your reaction first. How about a show of hands? Do you think the church is one generation away from disappearing? Yes? No? Okay, I got a lot of no's. Good. Why do you think no? Let's have you talk about it a little bit.
I think it might be 2 generations away.
2 generations, maybe.
You have the next generation, if they don't continue it,
Okay, for those of you who can't, actually, let's just make sure, I need to tell you all something. If anybody on the screen raises their hand and needs to ask a question, please tell me, because I'm looking in that direction. And the other thing is, if you don't talk either, when you talk, give your first name, in case they do hear, so that they can hear your name and your question or comment, okay? So that comment was, maybe we're 2 generations away. That it's a little slower than that maybe we're okay for the next generation, but then, so maybe part of this thought is, what do we do? Meg?
I think that that question comes from our white American Anglo-Saxon viewpoint. And I think that culturally, it's very alive other places and in other contexts.
So that comment was that perhaps that's a very American, white, European comment or context, and that the church is alive and well in a lot of parts of the world. Anybody else? Yes.
Bruce,
Ted.
Ted Strand. I have heard from a person who has spent a fair amount of time in the recent years in England. And I believe it's been relatively common that church attendance in Europe had been waning for a long time, but church attendance or a faith renewal in England is occurring in the late teens, 20s, early 30s group of people. They've seen an uptick in participation, whereas that 30, 40 group who would be leaders is where it kind of stopped dropping. So that's a observation of encouragement, I would say.
Yeah. In case you didn't hear online, the thought was perhaps that Europe was ahead of us, especially the British Isles, ahead of us in this waning of the church, but maybe are ahead of us also in a resurgence of faith communities in the younger age groups, like teens through 30s. Yeah. Yeah. Johnny, did you put your hand up?
Yeah, I certainly.
No, she didn't.
I certainly did. Diana Forrest. I was just thinking about music. I think if we had stayed with organ and hymnals and choirs, that might have been a problem for the younger folks. But we have now the contemporary choice of, guitars and drums and, and more modern music. I think the kids latch onto that, and that'll bring them in for, at least a couple of generations.
And Diana's comment was around the musical choices, that if we've moved towards contemporary music, guitars and different kinds of music accompaniment to worship, that is attracting some different people than the organ stuff. Well, I didn't know what word to use. So as you can see on these comments on the screen, if the faith isn't lived out, the church is in danger of becoming a social club rather than a place of transformation. That in other words, it's not just a place to come and sit around a table and eat some food with your friends. There is more to this, that there is some personal transformation, some learning that hopefully occurs. So we need to focus on that. Each one of us. I think this is where I was, if I had been asked another question last week when I say, well, you've got to try. I mean, trying ourselves, not trying to necessarily walk up to everybody and trying to change their faith right off the bat. I think each one of us has learning to do, thinking to do, praying to do, and trying to live our lives in the way that God wants us to live them. That is maybe part of all of this. You can't just come to church on Sunday and walk away, right? So how did you come to know the Lord, and how are you impacting the next generation? this is a share, so Eric was thinking he was leading today, so he, I'm sure, would be having you all lead by making your comments. I actually, some of my childhood was spent in New Orleans, Louisiana, going to a Southern Baptist church for a while. Very different from this. And I did go up to the front, and I was a little hesitant to walk up to the front in some of those southern summer kind of things, when everybody would go up to the front, say they'd been saved, and then we got to go in the big tank to get baptized. It's not like this. It is the preacher standing in the middle of a tank of water. This was behind a half glass window on the front of the sanctuary. You walked down the steps, and he took you with a hanky over your nose, and you went back in the water. So I just thought, oh no, I'm not doing that. And finally did. But you know, I think part of that with kids especially is they may go with their group of kids, and all the friends in my Sunday school level were going. When I was 17, I came from another country. I'm not an American native. I was born in Britain, and came over here with my dad's and mom's careers, and graduated early because of that. I started school at 4 over there, so I ended at 16. I did my 12 years. But they didn't really trust their daughter. My folks didn't really trust me going to college at 16. I don't imagine why. So I went and lived with my aunt and uncle, and went to school over in England for a year after high school. I was horribly homesick. Everything was different. Some things were wonderful, but I was homesick. And I think I just had tummy aches a lot. And my aunt let me stay home a couple days. And one of the girls in my class must have figured out, this girl just needs somebody to go talk to her. And she came and knocked on my aunt and uncle's door and asked if she could come talk to me. And she sat by me, and she prayed with me, and she invited me to a weekend retreat that her church was doing. And it's like I knew God was taking care of me. I had felt so alone, but why did I feel so alone? But that's how I came to really know. I'd already dunked in that tank, but I think there was some pressure. But that was feeling like there was really a connection. So there, I've bled everything out for you now. Tell me your stories. But there's a difference in feeling that there's really something there. Yes, Marty.
Question with that. Do you feel like your background kind of led up to that when she had that discussion with your friend, that your background in religion kind of were little steps toward that event in your life?
I'm sure that my background has definitely made it easier to maybe see what I saw. If I hadn't heard the stories, if I didn't know all those things and see other people coming to faith, I probably wouldn't have been as receptive. Yeah. And I don't think I really thought as much about it until after the fact. It didn't happen right there in that room. It happened after going to the retreat. I thought, you know.
So I was just thinking,
Yes.
I think a lot of people, as far as going out and talking to people, I think a lot of people just need these little conversations, these little steps along the way. They're not going to just see boom. You know, they need these little conversations. And when I was in Kentucky, it happened a lot in Kentucky. It doesn't happen here as much, but and I always say this is the weirdest thing, but it was like in the produce department at Kroger. You know, I'd be looking at, you know, a vegetable, and somebody would be beside me looking at a vegetable, and she'd tell me this, you know, her life story, because she'd be upset. Well, that would be the possibility. You ask, how can you do this? It's so simple. You know, somebody says something like that, and then I'd start talking to her about, not about that necessarily, but just throw that in, because it gives her a little step. You know,
Right.
So seeds planted.
it's a seed, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Marty Bonds is talking about how the little steps that happen towards faith can happen even in a grocery store, in the produce department, when you're picking up some kind of vegetable and you talk to the person next to you, that little seeds of faith can happen, or faith transfer, you know, somebody learning, somebody seeing that it helps other people. Anybody else have comments about all this? It's not very Presbyterian, I know, but I'm more comfortable with this than I was with the Baptist thing, just personally.
The first thing that came to mind when I read that, how did you come to know the Lord? What I wanted to add right on there was, and I'm still coming to know the Lord. I grew up in the Ebenezer Evangelical Congregational Church, where we had revival meetings, and it was, the question was, are you saved? And the answer was to be yes or no. And I appreciate a lot of that. I have a Bible where it's written in there on March something of them, 1956, I gave my heart to God, and I'm grateful for that. But as I have grown and hopefully grown in faith, one of my favorite Bob Young lines from the sermon years ago was, I have been saved, I am being saved, and I will be saved. And I identify much more with that. But I've gotten braver as I've gotten older, particularly with my grandchildren, of being able to just text them and say, I'm praying about this, because I wish I could do, you know, this is what I can do. And I'm braver about saying it to my kids who are, not so sure how they're going to accept it.
Judy, what?
Well, just recently, you know, Steve came back to me and said, you know, you prayed about this, didn't you? And I said, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Judy Everhard just was talking about the development of her faith, and that she remembers Bob Young's line, which was,
I have been saved.
I have
It
been
was
saved,
referring
I
to that.
am being saved, I will continue to be saved. That there's just a continuum through our lives of things happening, and the praying for people, mentioning it to them. And then her son recently came up to her and said, you prayed about that, didn't you? So a recognition in the next generation that she's actively praying about things that then impact them. Right. And an interesting fact that's connected to here is that Steve was attending the church that Eric came from. Just a by the by.
Yeah, and has been involved, you know, he has been a church goer.
Yeah.
More right now, just taking a little bit of a break, so he knows I pray about that.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm sure Eric's also gonna listen to this.
Eric.
Ted.
Yeah, Ruth, Ted Strand again. I relate somewhat, not exactly to what Judy's saying, but it build on that. I have a hard time answering, how did you come to know the Lord? Because I don't think I ever came, other than being born, to know the Lord. I grew up in a home that was very involved in the church, Lutheran church, in a rural farming community of Wisconsin. So all I ever knew in my life was being involved in Sunday school, youth programs, Luther League, which was the high school group for kids, and went to a Lutheran junior college. And that's my upbringing. It's part of me, my faith is. I didn't come to know it, it's just been there. So it's hard to answer that question, but it also makes it harder, I think, to, at least for me, maybe not everybody, to have that really deep-seated faith having spent 6 years in Japan and being part of the international church there with other Japanese people who who are part of a Christian community, it's only about 2%, 2 to 3% of Japan is Christian. And we would host Japanese youth group or Japanese young adults group in our apartment. We had the space to do it, being an international signee family. The Japanese live in these very little places. They couldn't get a big gathering. We might have about 15 or 18, mostly Japanese young adults. And we would talk about, how did you get to know the Lord, or where are you in your faith? And when a Japanese person decides they're going to join or be active in the Christian church, they give up. They have a real commitment. Whereas I was born into my faith, my religion. They get ostracized from their family. So they give up family connection. It's maybe changing some now, but that's the way it was in the 90s and before. That's what I can speak to. Every one of them said, being part of the church here, we are no longer part of our born family. You are our new family.
Wow. So Ted, in case you didn't hear online, Ted Strand just was talking about spending time in Japan after growing up in the Christian church in the United States and just feeling it was a part of him. And going over and experiencing it with people where in a country where only 2% of their population is Christian. And the people who joined with them in their meetings, their young adult meetings, really had to separate from their families to be a part of this faith group. It was not welcome in their families. So that is a huge commitment that I would guess none of us have had to make. To say, sorry, I'm not going to deal with you, family, because this is more important to me, to commit to Christianity. That's a big jump, big jump. Anybody else have comments on whether it's you or the impacting the next generation, anything, or should, yes.
Mike Tysowski. I think it starts in the home. And when I go back to try to answer this question, like Ted, I was born into it. And my grandparents immigrated to this country. And so I grew up in an evolving family trying to become American. And the very first thing that I remember is my grandmother getting up in the morning to get breakfast, prepare the family for the day. The first thing she did is she would go into every room in the house. She would recite a series of prayers. And I would hear this as a youngster. What is that? So, grandmother, what are you doing? I'm praying. And it started right there. Well, you want to be an adult. So what do? You join the group. You learn to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Some days going to church was an expectation. There was no, I'm not feeling good today. Sunday we go to church. Everybody goes to church. And when you go, you're dressed up. You're not like we are right now, very, very casual. And I remember one day the shirts were starched, the collars were pressed, and I've got my white shirt on and cufflinks. And I thought, if I break these cufflinks, I don't have to go to church today. So I broke my cufflink. My mother said to me, "Oh, you think you're not going to church today? Well, just wait a minute." So she gets my father's cufflinks, which I didn't know he ever had. And I went to church because I had cufflinks on my collar. And when you're in church, you are a member of a congregation. It takes a village to raise a child. Everything that you did was known in that congregation. Everything. And you didn't have to worry about walking down the street at night or misbehaving because word got home before the telephone call could be made. They knew everything you were doing. You were a product of the people that surrounded you in this church, in this community.
And they all knew about your cufflinks.
They knew the story. You think they didn't know? Yeah, and they watched you. Said, do you want to conform? Do you not want to conform? And we had priests. I see people dressed in black, white collars. I grew up with that. And they're not strangers to me. I'm not afraid to talk to them and meet them. And it's interesting to watch. And I've been to the Southern. I went to a Southern Baptist college, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's an extreme, going from the very rigid to the more structured, I guess is the word I'm looking for, and to see how people behave. And we all want to be accepted. I remember Eric or someone saying the church started with a meal. And you get in together as a group, you pray over the meal, you have discussions later, and you want to be a good neighbor. You want to do what other people are doing. So they have a great deal of influence on you as you come to my church, or are you misbehaving? Are you having a problem? Oh, I see you're sick, and they're bringing over a meal for you to have for this day. That is church. It's not this building, it's the program, it's the whole entirety that we surround ourselves with in a particular denomination.
Right. Mike Tysowski was just talking about how we are a whole church. All of your family, your community, everybody in your church comes around each person if they need it, to make sure that you are getting support, guidance, etc. Watching if there are things going wrong and making sure that you stay going in the right direction. I'm sorry if I didn't hit all of it. One of the other things I think that is a confounding situation now is that darn pandemic that happened a few years ago. I think there are some things that happened to church going for some very faithful people. Number one, I'm glad we were able to watch on Zoom or to stand in this parking lot and have church there a few times. But it changed whether families were focused on Sunday on all gathering with the whole church. Maybe there's discomfort because of illness in the family, or somebody who's having chemotherapy, or somebody who's just not comfortable being around that many people. And some families have decided, gosh, I have neighbors who said it was amazing to them. They realized that they actually love their family. But they had always been so busy going off and doing so many things with 3 kids that they hadn't really appreciated what their family brought to them. And so they cut activities out, and a lot of people are doing that and focusing on the things that are meaningful to them. So is church making that cut of the things that are meaningful to all families? That's one of the factors as well, I think. So I think maybe what we should do now, unless somebody has a really interesting last comment that didn't get out earlier, let's just read through this letter in case any of you didn't read it ahead. The letter to Laodicea. To the angel of the church in Laodicea write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. You say, I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and do not need a thing. But you do not realize you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear, so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes, so you can see. Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline, so be earnest and repent. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. To the one who is victorious, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat down with my Father on his throne. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So this is the last of the letters. Any of you have a reaction just to that? You heard some of the things I mentioned right at the beginning about the lukewarmness not being a good thing. It's like we have to decide whether we're in for the count or if we're not. right? So what does it mean to be spiritually lukewarm? Do you think? You just have assumptions. Well, I'm a Christian. I learned about it when I was 11, and yeah. If somebody came and asked me a bunch of questions about who I am and where I live, I could say, yeah. But does that make you a person who is helping the church or helping the church to continue to exist? No reaction. Yes, Diana.
It's, to me, it's sort of, I don't know how people can be lukewarm about spiritual things because they're so definite. You either believe in Jesus and God and, you feel faithful and you feel protected and all that, or nothing to do with it, But I guess there is a middle ground too, but I find it hard to understand. Well, but then there are, like Thomas doubted and had to feel the words of Jesus.
Mhm.
And the idea of, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That's scripture. And, I feel like, well, yeah, sometimes I wonder.
Perhaps Diana's mentioning it's hard to understand how you could be lukewarm, that you really either don't believe or you do believe. But if you really believe, I think the idea is you would live in such a way that you're continuing to learn, that you maybe talk in the grocery store in the produce aisle about something with somebody when it comes up. But if we don't do anything to live it, then that's maybe lukewarm. Yes.
Nancy Daly. I think frankly, it could be very easy to be spiritually lukewarm as far as, I show up on Sunday.
Yeah.
I give to the church.
Mm-hmm.
I help every once in a while. But there's not that real internal belief in it. It's just like, yeah, I was raised to come well.
What did Jesus expect of people who were following him in his day? Was he fine with somebody just saying, I don't feel like leaving my job. I don't feel like leaving home and following you? There was huge change in those people's lives, correct? Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Don, did you have a comment?
I feel when they're lukewarm when they want something. If they don't want something, they believe in God, but if something comes up, they go to church, or they feel that being lukewarm, I can turn myself around and pray to God. And, you could go to church, you can do a lot of things, but you could still have that, I don't want to say negativity to a degree, but being lukewarm means I can be lukewarm now because I'm not too happy what's going on. But then if I need the Lord, right, then the lukewarm goes away, and then I'm in the church and I'm praying.
Yeah. And Don just mentioned that perhaps you are lukewarm sort of most of the time. And then when you want something or need something, all of a sudden you can turn on and start praying for it and that sort of thing. How do you think the Laodiceans viewed themselves versus how Christ viewed them? Do you remember those verses?
Eric could always flip back so we can
I
check.
can. I was just wondering. I also noticed that Eric sometimes waits.
Yes, I remember.
That's true.
Testing us, but
I'm
nothing.
testing to see, but there you go. It's right here. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. You say, meaning the Laodiceans, I am rich, I have acquired wealth, I'm pretty special. I got what I need, right? But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. What do you think he thinks of the Laodiceans? Are we there?
They're judging themselves, it sounds like totally comparing themselves for how they're doing in the world, rather than looking to God, to what God looks at and judges.
Yeah.
So they've moved away from that center that they need,
Yeah.
which is God.
Yeah, he's definitely, or he's letting them know what you're doing is using the wrong report card. You're using an earthly report card to figure out if you think you're doing well. And really, you should be a bit more critical of yourselves, maybe. What do you think? I'm seeing nods, yes.
Just, I've got so many thoughts, everybody's sharing some really good, thoughtful things, but the faith is about a relationship. And I think of when we have relationships with family members or friends, we put the time in, we don't not speak to them or not spend time with them for long periods of time. And I feel like too often, those of the Christian faith, those that profess to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, we're not doing that. We're not spending the time with the Lord as you would with a worldly relationship. But there's too many of us not you have to put the time in for this relationship, for God to reveal things to you and for you to grow stronger in your faith. And that's, I think, where the issue is. I mean, going to church, checking off that box or whatever, but there's more to it than that, really. And
so the
Laodiceans,
so the Laodiceans were doing what you're talking about.
Yes.
They are not focusing on their faith in God. They're focusing on the things that are giving them worldly success. The gold things, and I think there were white clothes to wear. Somebody told me I should have been wearing a white dress. I think Don suggested that to teach this particular passage.
I'll tell you what I do is when I feel like at least 3 times a day, at least, I'll sit aside by myself and I'll pray. And to me, I'm praying to the Lord. There's nothing distracting me. I'm by myself. And I get a lot out of that. Be able to say, hey, look, I don't have this person talking to me, I go by myself.
So there may be some people who can pick up some clues from those of us here today. If you've got some other ideas about things you do to keep your faith active and work on your relationship with God, go ahead and comment on them. I'm going to skip pages again.
All right, Eric.
What?
All right, Eric.
What might be the significance of the gifts Jesus gave them be? What gifts did Jesus give them? Do you need me to flip back?
It was gold and the white clothes.
Well, did Jesus give them all of that? Or did Jesus give them other things? Or God give them other things?
Wanted them to be earnest to repent.
Mm-hmm.
They get to sit on the throne with him at the end.
If anyone hears it's just pay attention to me. I'm standing at the door knocking. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and I will eat with that person and they with me.
He's giving everything they need. He's giving to you. He's giving himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then his job here is for us to do something with it and not just forget that it's there.
So we can't forget that God is there and we need to pay attention in our lives. So what does it mean to have Jesus knocking at the door of the church? Not just our own personal lives.
Really a good idea to let him in.
Yeah. Diana suggested it might be a good idea to let God in.
What if
For
you got a
Jesus?
deadbolt on your door?
Well, we shouldn't have a deadbolt keeping Jesus out. just a thought. But that gets to something, I was on the vision team that put some things together. And one of the things that I couldn't help thinking about when I was preparing for today was how, and hopefully you'll hear more about this in the fall when summer break is all over with, but the things we talked about in the DNA of this church, how this church could feel, does feel, is in all aspects. Do we welcome everybody like Jesus would? Do we give opportunities for people to learn as long and as much as they want? At all ages, it shouldn't matter if you are 12 or if you're 82. Do we offer worship that invites different kinds of people? Somebody mentioned the different kinds of music. And I'm not going to remember because I don't have them right in front of me. And then one of the last ones is being friends to each other. Now, there were some words in the text. Maybe it's not clear enough, but we shouldn't just be friends just to be social. I think the kind of deep, meaningful friendships that we meant when we talked in the vision team were depending on each other. Right. When you notice a friend or someone in need, you go and be with them, you help them, you talk to them. That's sort of a Christian kind of, what Jesus would do is go be with someone who is in trouble, worried, struggling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks. Do you want to say any more about that, Carolyn?
Oh, I didn't realize that I had the audio.
We heard you.
Oh, Ruth, you're right. You're right on target. And that's been one of my concerns for our church at times, because there are members among the church family who do need some help from time to time. And I think sometimes we're so busy on what we consider the official outreach portion of the church's obligation that we sometimes fail to pay attention to some of the needs, the internal needs of our family. And I know that there are some people here who do need some help. And sometimes I don't think they're met the way they should be. And I say that very carefully, because we live very busy lives today, sometimes busier than they should be. And in fact, there's a new book I just got a hold of that was published by it's written by a professor at the University of Penn, and she's looking at the question of choices and all of the different choices that we have in our lives. And are we better off for having them? Or do we have too many choices? Okay. And of the choices that we have in our lives and the choices that we choose to pay attention to, which ones are the most significant and the most meaningful? And that's a question for Christians too, because we're all confronted with that. Do you constantly stay on social media? Do you get your information primarily from that? Or do you interact with other Christians and talk about some of the difficult things in life and try to help one another figure them out? I'll just leave it there.
Yes, Meg.
I'm still kind of on the last screen about the cold and hot, and lukewarm, and also what does it mean when Jesus is knocking at your door? And
what does it mean when Jesus is knocking at your door?
And I'm thinking that kind of helps me understand why cold would be better than lukewarm. Because if Jesus is knocking at the door, you can invite him in wholeheartedly and really engage and give him food and join in his work with him. You can also say, get out of here, I don't want anything to do with you, but you're still in dialogue with him if you're doing that.
Yeah.
But if you're lukewarm, you just, he's out there, I can't be bothered.
Yeah,
There's
in
nothing to
case,
do with it.
for those of you on screen, the comment from Meg was about the difference between cold, where if there's banging on the door and you're cold, you may let them in or say, get out, but there's passion in the conversation. With lukewarm, perhaps it's more like, who cares, whatever, move on, I don't need you particularly right now today.
Don't open the door.
And you don't open the door. So, yeah, interesting. All right. Of the 7 letters to the 7 churches, for those of you who have attended most of these or read the passages, which most clearly resembles Westminster? And maybe what we do is just focus on whether Westminster is cold, lukewarm, or hot. Because this is, where we went in our conversations with Vision, was so what are our strengths and what are the things that the Lord would have us do differently?
I think the Lord helps us with the Stephen ministry. It takes people and they sit them down and they talk to them and try to teach them the God's way. That's something that we do.
Yep, we do Stephen ministry, which is a good thing.
Matthew's 25. That's another,
I see nods, I see thinking faces, except for on the screen where we don't see your faces, so we assume you're thinking as well. Or which of the 7 churches or the cold, medium, hot most clearly resembles you? And why? And do you think there are things that this is making you think about? Should you maybe do something like what Don Urban does and separate himself off from all his other activities at work and so on a few times a day and just have a word with God? Or should you do a little reading more frequently? Build relationships with people where you can build your faith together. This isn't an alone thing necessarily. It can be. This can be done in group formats, no problem. Studying, fellowship with other Christians is part of what would make the Lord happy.
So which one
Resembles you.
resembles me on which day of the week?
Yes.
It varies.
Yes. Meg's comment was that, whether you're hot, cold, or medium or lukewarm is kind of a which day of the week are we talking about, and what other stuff do I have going on in my life that is taking my attention, right? Yeah. That's right. If you had time to do one thing, what would you take time to do? Pray, check email, look at social media.
It's back to the day.
Back in the day, what would you have done and what would you do now? Is this kind of an indictment of our current lives? Would you prefer a substantial or even adequate bank account or the assurance that God will meet and supply every need? Because that's what we're told.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we keep looking for more, don't we?
I think I wouldn't want to look at how much time I spent doing each of those and compile that.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, Rita, I think that if we look back on our days and we recognize the times that we have been really connected with God and have a routine of prayer daily. And then we realize that is the way it needs to be. I mean, but we veer off because of temptations of the world, I guess. But I feel like we're stubborn because if you really compare things, you know the better way, you know the way you need to do it, but it's a struggle for us for many reasons, right? The
Mhm.
pulls of life and
Right.
the world, but it's clearly, hopefully everybody, that's our desire, is to grow in our relationship with God, and you cannot do that without the routine, the priority being God.
Right. And it's hard for us humans, apparently, to keep our priorities where they might be at particular times. You do well for a while and then something else pulls on you.
Yep.
And it does happen. So
Like Don, though, he's saying praise 3 times a day. Sometimes maybe that's what we need
yeah,
to do.
to keep that connection and keep it right here.
The pulls to keep us away from
Right.
God. So.
Right. Yeah.
I have just a quick comment.
Yes, Dan.
I still remember when we prayed in school. I mean, I think most of us remember we could have prayer and salute the flag and things, even Bible reading sometimes. The teachers were allowed to let us read the Bible, but they weren't allowed to interpret it, that kind of thing, you know, put their mark on it. But I'm thinking, isn't it silly? Because if you're worried about a test that's coming up in the next, later in the day, who knows if you're praying or not? I mean, we can pray anywhere. It isn't just, always out loud, or it's just like, please help me. I studied, but please help me with this,
Right.
And that's just so personal.
Diana just pointed out that, this going off and praying by yourself doesn't have to be getting up from where you are and looking like you're doing anything different. You just can pray. You have a personal connection that you can call upon, right? Anytime, like when you're scared about that test or the boss asking you if you're done with a project or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Other comments? We have one more question. That's it.
I think that, what
Marty.
Diana said, Marty, I think what Diana said and Rita said, if you blend those together and you do your daily devotion time, but then you talk to God all day, like, please help me with this test, the little prayers all day, that's a good
Mhm.
life.
Yes.
That's a good life.
And you're talking about developing your own prayer life and your own faith. Something I think for us to think about moving forward in life, because this is part of what Eric was bringing in at the beginning with how many generations of church do we have left, is it's not just about us individuals. It's about our families. It's about next generations. It's about the world. So the things that we do aren't just about our own little life until our own little person disappears. It's everything. It's your son, it's your grandkids, it's your wider family, it's the people at school and work and clubs and everywhere, and how much you care about all of them. So the prayer life could include them. Any other thoughts on today's comments and Laodicea? Or the other thing that we're interested in is, what's your biggest takeaway from this series? Learning a little bit about the letters to the churches in Revelation. Should we do this one again sometime?
Specifically remember churches, but it seems like the studies that I've been in, one of the common themes have been, you may think you're doing fine individually. You people may think you're doing fine, and you churches, you may think you're doing fine. But here, what you've been doing is you've been using the wrong report card, as you said. You've been using the wrong report card, and what you need to do is come back to those eyes to see, those eyes to see, those ears to hear, to pray for those abilities. But, and to me, that idea of Jesus knocking at the door is a wonderful promise in a way. That's, Jesus is always there saying, I want my relationship with you. I want you to learn.
Mhm.
I have stuff to teach you. And it's not going to be easy sometimes.
Right.
But that to me has been a common theme in all of these. So it's for a question for us individually and as a church, when we think we're doing fine,
Yeah.
then to
And
use
it's
that
fine,
phrase, you're
good
in
enough.
trouble. Right, is fine, good.
It's fine, good enough.
Yeah, enough is,
It's
even the
lukewarm.
enough is one of those words.
This suggests also that lukewarm isn't just not good enough, it's damaging. Right? Other thoughts? Feedback for us. Meg and I are on the team that Eric works with, the adult spiritual growth. So feel free to give us feedback anytime or join us. Nothing? You got nothing? Well, then I think we can call it a wrap for the day and have a good rest of your day. Maybe find a couple quiet places and have a little prayer or two with yourself.
Go to Giant to the produce.
Go to the Giant to the produce aisle.
Yeah.
Those of you joining us online, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank
You did a good job.
Welcome.